I Can Relate, a podcast for teens, about teens, and by teens, is presented by Lee Summit Cares. Lee Summit Cares mobilizes community partners to develop a culture of physical and mental wellness for Lee Summit youth and families that inspires positive, healthy choices. Lee Summit Cares is currently seeking youth in grades 8 through 12 who are passionate about advocating for a healthy lifestyle among their peers. For more information or to apply, visit lscares.org.
Alright, hi everyone, my name is Olivia and welcome back to I Can Relate. And today we're going to be talking about one of our past episodes. And I listened into it because I wasn't present for it, and I really enjoyed what I heard. And before we get into it, I'm going to have one of my friends sum up what we talked about with our friend, our guest.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's Chidera. So on our last episode, we talked to Mr. Andy Campbell. He is the principal of Summit Ridge Academy. And we basically talked to him about empathy, what empathy means. And he really focused in on, in order to show true empathy, we must listen to one another. And that's something I really took away from that episode.
Yeah, and I feel like empathy is something that we all, could work on, especially in today's age. It's hard with technology. We've seen more harmful things be spread through the internet, sadly. And I think it was really interesting to hear from his perspective, especially an alternative school in Lee Summit, because not everyone, it's a different situation than what most people have to go through. So, um, my question for everyone who is present for the podcast is, what did you gain from listening to his story and his perspective?
All right. Everyone's cool with it. I'm gonna go first. I'm Riley, by the way. Welcome back. I think for me, one of the big takeaways, because I was like taking notes and everything to listen back to it, I think we live in a world of labels, and sometimes we don't even acknowledge that just sometimes we label people based on where they go to school, how they dress, what kind of car they have, stupid stuff, because like I think we just don't realize that we're doing it. It's just subconsciously doing that. And I think even when I was asking questions and stuff, I was doing it and listening back. I was like, wow, I learned a lot more than I thought I would just talking to somebody about that kind of thing. And I think for me personally, and I'll probably say it later, my definition of empathy has definitely changed after listening to him. So yeah, feel free, someone else hop on in.
So something that really stuck out to me was when he talked about listening, and he said how you can hear someone, but to really listen is completely different. And I don't know if you guys know the story of like Amazing Grace, but how they talk about how the man was on the slave ship and then he went blind, and then the guy who wrote it, and then he was able to truly see like the horror they were causing onto the slaves and stuff like that. So for me, it's just like, in order to really like understand where people are coming from and to really be able to relate and show empathy for one another, you must listen. And that's something that really has been sticking with me whenever I'm talking to like my siblings or anyone now. I'm trying to make sure that I'm really listening, or even my mom when she's telling me to like wash the dishes or something, even something little like that, just to really like listen and not just hear, because I think it's so easy for us to just dismiss something, or if we think we know what someone's going to say, or we try to put these, again, like you said, Riley, these labels on people we think we know, but we really don't. So when you're really sitting back and actually listening, then you're able to actually show empathy and understand better.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to piggyback off of Shadera's a little bit, because that was definitely something that I took from when Mr. Campbell was talking and speaking, was just about really listening and actually taking in what the person says or their actions, instead of just kind of like having one ear open but then your mind somewhere else, because that's not really being empathetic. You're not really caring about what that person's going through, or just whatever situation you're in general. You really have to sit back and listen to how a person feels or how they're speaking, even their body language, and just truly kind of being versed into what they're talking about and saying, to, I think, fully be empathetic, because you can't just have one ear out and your mind somewhere else while they're speaking. That's not you actually trying to help that person or be empathetic towards this person. It's kind of like, um, you're just kind of like helping them out, but not truly. And I think it's definitely was something that Mr. Campbell really helped me realize and learn when it comes to empathy is like you have to really be listening and really be 100% invoked in what this person is saying or what other people are going through, whatever situation you're in, to really have actual empathy.
I totally agree. I want to go back to one thing that Riley said about judgment, and I feel like as a society, like especially as a whole, like we're quick to judge people. Like whenever you hear alternative school, you don't have like good thoughts running through your mind because we've been taught that that's where like the bad kids go. But I actually have a friend, his name is Jared, and he goes to Summit Ridge, and he is super nice, and he moved here from California this year, and their education system is vastly different from what we do. And to finish out high school, he had to attend Summit Ridge because of where he was, like education wise, in California compared to here. So whenever I say that I have a friend who goes to Summit Ridge, people automatically assume, oh, you're friends with someone who got expelled or suspended, or oh, they must have done something terrible. When in reality, he's just a kid who had to move to the middle of nowhere because of his dad's job, and it so happens that he had to go to the alternative school in the Summit. So my question to you guys also kind of is, how do you think being judged for where you're placed, like not by choice, has on someone?
I think that has a huge effect. And I think when you mean by place, do you mean just like anything? Like, because I'm thinking like race and school
That
and
too, like, no one's, you can't pick the family that you've been born with, like you've been placed with, like people are born into situations, or they're put into situations that they have no control over. And so like to be judged for that, I feel like that's just completely unfair, you know?
yeah, I 100% agree. I think, I'm sure all of us, I feel like this is something that every person deals with, but I definitely think I've seen it in myself and just other people I'm surrounded by. It's just like having judgment on who you are. I guess like the biggest one for me, or just like the people I know, I guess, would be people that go to West, especially with just the schools. People have this idea that like West is like super rich and you have to be like super rich and to go there or whatever, which, in obviously that's not true. And I think that judgment can stem from not just what school you go to, but just kind of how you conduct yourself in general. I know that like I've been dealt with a lot of situations where people may have thought I was like mean, or like had this idea that I'm better than someone just because of even this, like my skin color, or like how I conduct myself in general. And it stems from judgment, and I think that it's so difficult to get out of that, because I think every person still does that, in some probably not as severe as some cases, but there are times where you can look at a person, like what a person's wearing, or what they're doing, and you may have this idea like, oh, like I'm going to put you in this box, and then you get to know that person and you're like, oh, like you're actually really amazing and you're not who I thought you were. um so I definitely think judgment causes like a lack of empathy with people.
Right. And I also think judgment for me kind of stems, I know it stems from a lot of different things, but for me, I definitely think fear and just ignorance. Like, I don't know if you guys heard of the allegory of the cave, where basically like the people are in a cave and then there's one person that leaves the cave and it's like sees so much more beyond the cave, like in life in general and stuff, and then comes back to the cave and then tells everyone in the cave, because they only live in the cave, they tell everyone else in the cave that there's like life beyond the cave that they live in, and everyone wants to ignore it, or they're fearful of what is beyond or what could potentially be happening, anything else like that. And I think so many people are just scared or ignorant to the fact that someone else can be different from them, or just not really look like them, and they don't want to accept that because they don't know what that will entail.
I definitely think judgment does come from fear, but I also think it comes from lacking emotion to be able to just try and not, I don't want to say understand, because there are situations where you can't understand people. I think there's just a time where you can say, I can't always relate to your situation, but I can always try to understand and listen to your situation. So I think there's a point where in your example, I could not stop thinking about Maze Runner. It's so bad, but I could not stop thinking about Maze Runner. That just leaving the cave, I think you can apply that as just leaving your own comfort zone and being like, hey, there's other people out there who may not like the same things I do or may not go to the different school or whatever that might be separating us, but just taking a moment to step out of that comfort zone and be like putting yourself out there. I think empathy doesn't really work unless you're willing to put yourself out there with other people.
Right. And I think we, as people, just need to make sure that we learn that everyone has different perspectives on life. We can't just assume that everyone has grown up with the same like things that we have or is like us. Like everyone is so different and unique in their own ways, and people really need to take into account like just the uniqueness of everyone else and perspectives.
Yeah, it's literally like what we learned whenever we were kids. Like my mom would always say, like, put yourself in that person's shoes. Like, you can never fully do that because everyone is so unique, like you said. And I feel like judgment like stems, like what you said, from ignorance, and it's just all, I feel like honestly our world could use a little bit more empathy and understanding towards everyone. But I just really liked the thought. I liked your cave analysis, like your cave um what I'm trying to say.
Analogy.
Yeah, there we go. I said analysis, but yeah, it's like I think that's a beautiful way to think about it.
Thank you.
This topic, I think, in itself can be hard for teenagers just to approach because you don't really think about it in like a day-to-day type of thing. It's just something you either do or you don't do. And I think something that really resonated with me is when Mr. Campbell said it's like a muscle that you just kind of have to keep working and growing at it with, and that sometimes we just forget about it. I know I'm not the best exerciser or whatever, so using that analogy was kind of like, well, whatever. But like in all reality, it is something you just got to keep pushing towards. Like you can't just run a marathon if you walk off the couch. I mean, some people can. Kudos to them, but I think with empathy too, it's just being able to take it one step at a time. I don't know what you guys think about that. Like, how do you think you can grow in empathy, or like how you've seen others around you grow in empathy? Or, yeah, I'm just rambling at this point. Someone please take over.
I guess with me, with empathy, I just kind of caught myself. There's so many people who I'm so close with now or really enjoy being around now who I like had these really harsh or like quick judgments about them and maybe distanced myself from them just because of this idea I put in my mind of who they were, or even like sometimes listening to what other people may have said about them and kind of, not being rude or mean to them, but just kind of like not even building a relationship with them or trying to. And then I got to know them and then I was like, oh wow, like this is an amazing person. And then I kind of caught myself with my actions and how I was acting. So I think that's super important, is just like noticing when you're judging someone, or knowing when you're not being empathetic, or noticing when you're kind of distancing yourself from certain people because of this like narrative you made in your mind. I just think like you have to kind of know and notice your actions.
I definitely agree. I've definitely caught myself a few times, we're teenagers. Like I might talk bad about someone, but then I catch myself because I remember I don't know both sides to the story, or I don't know who this person really is. I'm only hearing one side from someone who's probably biased about the entire situation, and that shouldn't determine how I see that person.
Right. Where do you guys think that empathy should be practiced the most? Just curious. Or in what situation would you say? Or yeah.
I think empathy, like, honestly starts at home with a lot of other situations and a lot of other things that may happen in your life. It's like if you're kind of grown up around people who may not be super open about talking about their problems, or may not be open to talking with you about your problems, I think it's super difficult for someone to be empathetic and grow up and be empathetic. Me as a person, I really don't enjoy talking about my issues. I more enjoy helping other people and kind of deal with my own problems by myself. But I think that's made me a lot like a more empathetic person because I handle my issues on my own, and it's a lot easier for me to help other people with theirs. So I definitely think empathy. I think it starts at home, honestly, but once again, like not everyone, like you said, Shadera, has the same home life or like was raised the same. So I think that definitely causes your lack of empathy, or if you're just an empathetic person in general.
Yeah, I definitely think it stems most from your home life. Like if you grew up in a place with a family who wasn't very empathetic towards you or didn't show you like, you know, affectionate ways of showing love, like or empathy in general, then you as a person might grow up doing the same things and not being empathetic yourself because that's what you grew up knowing. It's just like how, people say you're not born a certain, like, you're not born hateful, you're taught it. And I feel like that kind of goes the same way with empathy. You're going to be a more empathetic person if you were raised, like, by other people who are empathetic, but sadly, not everyone is in that situation. So it's harder to overcome those things that you're taught since you were born. And I feel like that's another way to look at it is everyone might not be as empathetic because they had to work harder at it. So it might take them longer to get to a place where you are.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
I think what, for me personally, I think you're right when it says it comes from home, but sometimes people, like, they leave the home and be like, well, that doesn't seem right, and they just learn it on their own. So I think some people, they just kind of learn to adapt with it over time. But I think for me, I don't try and judge people because there are three sides to every story. That's what I've been taught. And so I try not to put myself in that situation. But for me, I think I try to empathize with the people I want to say stereotypicalize. Is that a word? Overgeneralize? That sounds right. But like the people I try and put in boxes, those are the ones I try and be like, hey, that's not cool. You don't know them. Try and like maybe walk a mile in their shoes or just say, hey, I don't need to learn their story. I can just accept them for who they are. Because sometimes you don't need empathy. You just need to understand or just be okay with not understanding and being okay with their situation. I don't know.
Right. And also, I think we all just have bias that we're unaware of. I remember last year, this girl in my debate class, she was doing her project, her little informative on bias and stuff like that. And she had me take the implicit association test. And it's done by Harvard. And you basically get to see like your hidden biases that you have. And honestly, I would recommend anyone to take that because you really just, it really just sets into perspective. Like you're not even trying to have, you're just basically saying or putting in whatever you think, and you get to see your real biases that you subconsciously have. And I think that's really interesting. But
No, that is really interesting because no one is 100% perfect. And I feel like that, everyone knows that. No one's perfect. But that would be really interesting to like take a test and see like what would come out of that. Especially that. That's so interesting. I didn't even know that was like a thing.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
But
Oh, sorry. You can go ahead.
Oh no, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to ask, do you think you approach situations differently now that you've taken that test and kind of just seen like, hey, this is something I personally have done, step aside or like embrace it?
Definitely. Like I remember one of them, it's like I don't know for sure. It asks you like something about, I don't know even what the question was, but it has a whole bunch of different faces on one of the tests and you like click on something. I forgot what it was asking, but it really is it's just really eye-opening, I would say. I would say I definitely go about situations differently because I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's the way I would perceive it, but let me take into account all these other factors too and definitely try to handle whatever situation I'm in differently.
Yeah, totally. It kind of makes you like take a step back and look at what you do before you do it. Like
Yeah,
approaching a situation.
for sure.
For our listeners listening, what do you think, based off the interview or just life in general, would you suggest for people who need to learn empathy or give, I don't know, can there be too much empathy?
I think there can be too much empathy when you're sacrificing your own happiness in a way. You're sacrificing yourself to the extent where you're like not able to function properly or not be able to go about your day without constantly like you don't want to empathize so much to where you're worrying about not about being empathetic, if that makes sense. It should be something that's kind of like natural, like you're just going about your day and taking into account every single thing. Like just kind of being present in the moment and being able to understand that there's so many things going around or going on in general, and just to be able to breathe and just understand.
That's actually a really good answer. I kind of had to think about that for a sec. I'm really bad about that. I think in general, I'm one of those people, if you tell me something, I have to be like, okay, I need to take a minute, process this, I'll come back. And I think for me, empathy, that's kind of hard for me because, like he said, you don't always need to respond to a situation. Sometimes you just need to listen. And I think for me, I'm not always the one to respond to a situation, but like try and process it and be like, well, I could have said that in the moment and been like, because I'm one of those people, I overthink pretty much everything in my life. I overthink what to eat for breakfast, what shirt to wear. I'm so bad about that. Most of the time, I don't even eat breakfast because I'm like, it's too hard of a decision. But I, I think it's just something where he said it really well. I wish I could remember exactly what he said, like something about being able to listen and not always respond. And I was wondering, as people who were trying to be empathetic, how do you think, do you struggle
Yeah.
with that of trying to respond to situations, or do you just say like, hey, I'll listen and yeah, I don't know.
For me, I think I try to just okay, I'm gonna give you an example. Like in the morning, take for instance, this is like for anyone to try to apply empathy because I feel like it's so easy to say, oh, do this, but like a real situation where you want to demonstrate empathy in a way. And this is just very brief. Like, take for instance, you wake up in the morning. If you have siblings, your parents, or whoever, you're downstairs and they come downstairs being really loud, obnoxious. They start yelling at you or something. In order to, I guess, show empathy, you don't know if they woke up on the wrong side of the bed that morning. You don't know what has happened the minutes before they got downstairs, before you had that encounterment. So you can either fight fire with fire, kind of, or just take a deep breath and you can address them in a better way, or like at a different time, I would say something like that. That's what I'm getting at. So for me, like if my sister was coming downstairs yelling at me in the morning, I would really just kind of take a deep breath and just not, you don't have to respond to everything in that moment because something could be going on, and then later just come back and talk to her and really like show, and I don't know, something could have been going on. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm just trying to
No,
show an example.
I totally get what you're saying. Um, it's all stemming back to you really don't know what everyone goes through.
Right.
Um, and you think that you do, like, with the internet, again, like it seems like everyone shares absolutely every aspect of their life. But behind the screen, behind closed doors, it's hard to tell exactly what happens with everyone. So anytime, like, again, we're in high school, so there's always drama. And anytime that like someone is being like not harmful, but rude to me or saying something about me, I try not to like do the same to them because I don't really know what made them say that or like what went through their head to think that that was okay and what their situation is or what they heard. So that's why rather than like trying to do the same thing as them and put them down, I try to understand where they're coming from, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. And I also think that you can still stick up for yourself and show empathy. You don't have to like remain silent or just not respond. It's just kind of the way you go about responding and just taking into account that you don't know what that person's going through. So really just stick up for yourself, like be respectful about the way you go about it is what I would say.
Yeah, never let anyone like harm you to the point where like, you're it hurts you like severely, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But stick up for yourself, but also don't try not my advice would be like try not to sink down to their level to make them feel as bad as they made you feel because it usually never makes you feel any better.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think for me this is a really like silly story now, but like in middle school, I think it was 7th or 8th grade. I don't even remember when it was. I just remember feeling so hurt because I like had a broken foot. I think it was when I had my broken foot. I had to sit on this bicycle and pedal with the foot cast, and someone thought they were really funny by putting me on their Snapchat story, and like it was one of my friends, or I thought they were my friends, but they made a big joke about it. So it kind of went around the school, but like in a middle school kind of way where it was like, LOL, that's hilarious. But me not having Snapchat at the time didn't know this was happening. So I actually was like walking around for like days before someone was like, LOL, you biking with a cast was hilarious. I'm like, what are you talking about? But I think for me, that kind of just showed me that there's so much going on around you sometimes, and we don't even realize it. I think for me, that helped me with empathizing because I can just see all these different people see all these different types of things and they deal with all these different things. And it just taking the time to be like, hey, I can either choose to be mad about it or ignore it. And I was kind of upset about it, but I didn't say anything because I was like, if they needed a laugh, there you go, I guess. But if that's really important to you, there you go, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. This is such
Yeah.
a deep conversation. I think for empathy, I've always thought about like those elementary school videos, where they're like sympathy versus empathy, and they have the little fox and like going down the ladder. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but like I think going into that conversation, I kind of expected something like that, like him just saying, you need to go down the ladder and like pick people back up with you, and sometimes you just need to sit with them and listen to them at the bottom of a pit or whatever. But I think just taking it so much deeper and saying, well, you know what? I don't maybe know what's down there, but like, I don't know. It's just so hard. We live in such a judgy country. Everything around us is so crazy. It's hard for us to just go down there without making ourselves kind of in a low point. And I just think, Mr. Campbell, you are a wise man if you're listening to this, because man, you're like the Yoda of empathy. But I think it's
Yeah. I wanted to go back to something that Mr. Campbell actually said whenever I was listening in. He talked about how you have to listen to, and I think one of you guys mentioned this earlier, you have to listen to actually be empathetic. Now, what do you think that really means? Because I heard what Mr. Campbell said about it, but I wanted to know what you guys think he meant by you have to listen to be empathetic.
dang.
I think you just have to be all ears when someone's talking and just really kind of take in everything that they're saying and comprehend what they're saying instead of just kind of like, oh yeah, that sucks. And also, I think you said this earlier, Olivia, just like not speaking and just taking everything in because, like, once again, there's times where people don't need advice, they just want to vent. So it's really like sitting back and knowing the person who's talking to you and trying to truly understand what's going on with them instead of just kind of like listening and not really giving any feedback or not really giving much to them, but like really sitting back and saying, okay, what's going on with this person and trying to comprehend what's going on with them and really trying to help them out the best way you can.
Yeah, and not only that, I feel like we definitely whenever someone says, we tend to do this, oh, I'm so tired. Oh yeah, I'm so tired too. How many hours of sleep did you get last night? Oh, I got 4. Or like it's like a competition almost to see who you should feel bad for more. So whenever I heard him say you need to listen to actually be like empathetic, I took it as you need to be able to listen to them and their problems without having to make it all about you.
Right.
Because I feel like you really have to like you need to give them the attention that they need and listen to what they have to say and not turn it around and be like, "Oh, I totally feel you." Because sometimes people just don't need that. They need to hear you say like, "I'm here for you." I might not understand what you're going through, but I'm here for you, or just they might not even want you to say anything, you know. Um
Definitely.
yeah, and I feel like as teens we tend to try to make everything like a who should we be more, you know, sad for, like, oh, you got 6 hours of sleep, oh well I got 5 and I have an exam today, you know.
Right.
To be
And
truly
like
empathetic, you have to like understand where they're coming from and you don't have to make it all about yourself.
right. I think it's just important to listen to understand. Like the best analogy I can think of is like going to the doctor's office. If you're telling your doctor, "Oh, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts," if they're only listening to the first 2 things, they might misdiagnose you. You might be end up getting treated for something that you don't even have. just like it's important to really listen because you might miss what that person's really trying to say to you, what you're really trying to gain from that moment, that whatever thing, situation that's going on, that's happening.
Your analogies are like on point today. I applaud
Thank you.
They really are.
I crap, I just lost my train of thought. I was gonna say something that I thought sounded wise, but I think crap, you kind of just took my thunder. I don't remember what I was gonna say.
I'm sorry.
What was it? I wrote it down. Oh no. Come back to me. I need a sec.
I have a question for you guys. Why do you think it's hard for people to understand others or just show understanding or anything like that?
I think it's just once again because of how people were raised and maybe even the experiences people went through. I know there's a lot of people who went through certain things and that's kind of made them very like cold to certain issues and problems. So they think like, oh, I don't need to talk about what's going on with me. Like, you know, even sometimes saying, oh, your problems aren't as bad as this person's or this. It's like they really don't have empathy for other people because I don't think they ever learned it or situations where they've been in. And that's kind of made them not talk about their issues and not want to hear other people's problems. So I just think that's another issue that can make people not empathetic is just kind of situations that have happened to them and like how they were raised.
I definitely agree. It definitely stems from where you grew up and how you grew up, and sometimes sadly like it can't, I mean anything can be changed. You can always unlearn what you've been taught, thankfully. And it all kind of, it's about your willpower, and you're the only one who can truly change who you are and how you view things. So it's really, it can be difficult, you know, to overcome something like that.
Right. I liked when you mentioned labels, Olivia. Like, I'm thinking celebrities, even we put
Mhm.
labels on just different people, or we try to make them like you disassociate a celebrity from like just a normal person when really that's just another human being who experiences the same pain, the same emotions as any other person. So you're not able to really relate with them or understand. Say Oprah got something wrong with her, her foot broke or something. Well, Oprah's not as much pain as me because she's rich. That's what people want to say or something. Just
Yeah.
anything like that, you know?
Mhm.
Absolutely. That's a really good comparison.
And I feel like the thing is like people like to try and invalidate other people because their struggles might not seem as hard, which I get. I mean, yes, you know, there are certain situations like, oh, I woke up late this morning isn't comparable to I got into a car accident on the way to work. But
Right.
that doesn't invalidate, you know what I'm saying? Like there's everyone's issues are valid, but there are some that are more pressing than others. So,
Definitely.
I think
yeah.
sometimes too, people will just vent to you about their little problems because they're not ready to talk about the big things that are really pressing in their lives right now. So I think sometimes you just need to be like, hey, you know what? You got 3 hours of sleep. My bad. Or like, even if you feel like your issue is more important or like something bigger is happening in your life compared to a person, just take the time to step out of like yourself kind of and your issues and just be like, hey, I mean, not even respond to them. Sometimes the biggest way of empathy is just saying, how do you want me to approach this? How do you want me to respond to this? I don't know what you're going through. I don't know how to help you. How can I react the way you want me to? So,
Something that I've always thought, and you know, since we're kind of talking about like invalidating people's situations, is like you don't understand what other people are going through. And I kind of agree with you, Riley. When people bring up maybe like small issues that happen to them, they may not be ready to talk about the big problems in their lives. But I've always tried to never say like, oh, your problem isn't as big as mine or as this person's, because you truly don't know how certain issues affect other people. And I just believe that it's no one has the right to say like, oh, my problems are bigger than yours. Obviously, like you said, Olivia, like there are certain situations that's obviously like not comparable to one another, but also I don't think you should, like, I don't think anyone has the right to say, well, your issues are not that important because.
yeah.
But Riley, you mentioned like just asking, how can I help you? And I think that's really important because a lot of times we don't know how to help people, and it's better than being silent or just like kind of just staring at them. Just ask them really like, how can I help you in this situation? what can I do for you to help you?
Definitely. I think I kind of got that worldview because recently I had my grandma pass away, and something that I got told a lot is grief gets dealt with different ways by different people. And so for my dad, it was his mom. And so I was just like, well, if that was my mom, I'd be devastated. And sometimes he doesn't always show that, but there's just moments like on Mother's Day, it really hurt him a little bit to be there without his mom, kind of. And so I was just like, you know what? I don't know how to help you. How can I help you? And sometimes he's like, I don't need anything right now. And then some days he's like, I just need a hug. Or sometimes he's just like, come sit with me for a minute. I don't want to be by myself. And so sometimes it's just like taking the situation, taking the person into account. And sometimes they may not want anything, and that's okay. If they don't want anything, don't push them to have something, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with, people grieve in different ways. People handle situations in different ways. Absolutely.
Okay, guys, so today we talked about empathy, what it means to be empathetic, and basically just went over our interview with Mr. Andy Campbell. Thanks for listening to I Can Relate. It's Chidera, Riley, Devin, and Olivia.
You've been listening to I Can Relate, a podcast for teens about teens by teens. I Can Relate is produced by Fredcast Podcast Network and made possible by Lisa McCares. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.